I'm just going to add that today we have more than 200 professionals from all over Europe came to this place, including outstanding TV journalists, media experts, and scientists who cooperate with the industry. For the next 2 days, we're going to talk about the use of artificial intelligence in journalism, storytelling, and the revolution in public media in Poland, which I'm very interested in. And also trolling, program producing during the war in Ukraine, and climate journalism. And that's the big one too. My name is Małgorzata Dzieciniak, and I'm a journalist. I work in Polish public television. I've been in media for the last 17 years. Most of the time as a news reporter, and I'm a deputy editor-in-chief working on The Question for Breakfast, one of the biggest morning TV shows in Poland. So as you guess, I have a lot of experiences in asking questions in very early morning. So, are you ready for creative brainstorming? I guess you're ready, you were born ready, so let's start. Our plan for today is some interesting discussion divided in 4 topics. Between discussion, we'll have a coffee break and lunch. The first one is artificial intelligence in journalism, as I already said. And I would like to invite to the stage our first speaker, Mr. Charlie Halford, Principal Research Engineer from BBC UK. May I invite Mr. Charlie Halford on the stage? Oh, you're already here. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Yeah, can you hear me all right? OK, now I've got my clicker. So yeah, I'm going to talk today about news workflows and how AI is really changing how news workflows, production, the consumption of news. And I'm also going to spend quite a lot of time thinking about the risks that are involved with AI and finding ways to reduce those risks, to mitigate them, maybe even get rid of them altogether, because there really is a very bright future ahead if we can do that. So first of all, let's have a look at a few examples. We're going to go through consumption, what it looks like, what AI looks like for consumers today. We'll have a look at newsrooms, go into some production, also go into some how we might generate new stories using AI. Then we'll go into some of the risks that we think we might have as we move into this new world. And yeah, just checking the time. And then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about a technology that the BBC and other media organizations and technology companies have started creating and adopting, which is called content credentials from an organization called the C2PA, and we'll go into that later. So hello again, I'm Charlie Halford. I've been a principal research engineer at BBC R&D, and I've been with the BBC for about 8 or 9 years now. I've got primarily technical background, so I'm interested in data models, metadata, and internet standards. And I currently lead the BBC's work on Project Origin, where we co-develop this C2PA standard with other tech companies and media companies. And I look for opportunities within BBC workflows to roll that out. I'm also a member of the BBC R&D's advisory team, where I provide emerging technology analysis. So first of all, let's have a look at some of the content production improvements we might start to see. So I'm going to show you some examples. AI is absolutely vast, and there is so many opportunities here that I couldn't show you them all. So we'll just pick a few. So first of all here, let's have a little talk about virtual production. So more and more production is virtualized, whether that's using green screens to place presenters or actors in different places, or entirely replacing sets with computer-generated assets. AI is helping the whole way along that workflow. And this particular example is just showing how you can take a green screen shot piece of footage, and you can relight it depending on the scene that you want to put it in. So if we have a look, so you can see the dynamic lighting effects from the background there is automatically being applied to the actors. And like as something that is essentially, not free from a cost perspective, but free from an effort perspective, I can see these kinds of applications of AI just becoming more and more commonplace as we discover different ways to assist in that production pipeline. Another one is using text generation. So everybody will have probably seen ChatGPT. ChatGPT allows us to enter some text, some question, and we get some answer back. Sometimes it makes absolutely no sense at all, but a lot of the time it's actually amazing, the amount of insight it can give you. And so we wondered if we could take the model behind one of those pieces of software behind ChatGPT, could we help journalists? And here what we've done is we said, can we help people understand more about the article they're reading? Are there complex topics in there? So that's step one, identify some complex topics. And then step two is give journalists a set of explainers for those topics that they might want to choose from. So we give them maybe 3 or 4 examples of a short explainer for that topic, and then they're free to edit those and make changes or reject them. And so ultimately, what comes out to the audience has already gone through a journalist. And this is a trial, by the way, but it's just exploring what we can maybe start to do to kind of ease the workflow for journalists who have already written a story. And so here the explanation for a carbon footprint is pulled from an LLM, one of these AI models. Another thing we think will really help in our production pipelines is getting more to audiences. So using the existing resources you have, can we actually do more? Can we create more content that is more specific and more accessible to our audiences? And particularly in the area of language, getting things translated is a bottleneck. If a story comes in this is in a BBC example, in one of our World Service locations, and it hasn't yet been translated into English, are we able to cross-translate that into another language? And the idea is not to completely replace a workflow here, it's to add new stories that wouldn't have made it out otherwise. And again, reinforcing that we haven't put this into production yet, this is still a trial, but can you then give somebody a baseline article to work with that they can then sub-edit to then release? And then there's this. This is pretty amazing stuff. This has come out only in the last few weeks or perhaps last month. So this is OpenAI's Sora model. I'm not sure if people have seen this yet, but this is similar to OpenAI's ChatGPT in that you can put a prompt in. So we've got a prompt here. A movie trailer featuring the adventures of a 30-year-old spaceman wearing a red wool knitted motorcycle helmet with a blue sky, a salt desert, cinematic styles shot on 35mm film with vivid colors. And what Sora can do from this is really amazing. And that blows my mind every time I look at it. The amount of, the lack of detail that was in the prompt that has resulted in this entire video, but also the fact that the prompt is following the instructions there. And the implications, I think, are huge for production, like maybe in pre-production where you're considering ideas, all the way along the production pipeline. I think really AI is opening up a huge amount of different opportunities to create new content. Another thing I wanted to quickly talk about was AI in the newsroom. So what can we do with AI to help generate stories, to create new stories, to find insight where we might not have had it before? So this is a really great example from a talk at South by Southwest, which I've got a reference at the end, which I recommend you look at. But this is BuzzFeed News. And BuzzFeed News had an AI team. And what they did is they were looking at some flight path data of planes. And somebody identified one flight path where they saw a plane circling, and they wondered, why is that happening? So they used that pattern, and they developed a model around that to extract that pattern from lots of different bits of data, from all flight paths in the US. And they found this. They found all of these planes were involved in circling behavior. And so once they'd identified the planes, they then traced them back, and it turns out most of these were private planes hired by law enforcement agencies in the US. And it turns out these are private surveillance organizations being contracted by law enforcement. So as you can imagine, that was a really interesting story to break. And then here is a survey that's done by the amazing Reuters Institute for News, where they've asked people where they think AI is most important at the moment in 2024. I think we've gone through transcription, copy editing, tagging is another one we haven't shown. I think it's quite interesting that news gathering, so helping identify stories or interrogate data that I just talked about, is right down the bottom. And I can understand why. There's a lot of effort involved in development that's required there. But what is interesting is the content creation that we showed briefly with video and graphics and things like that is relatively high up there, with very important and somewhat important. And so AI is sort of everywhere. So how's it helping for consumers? Where do we see it at the consumer level? We see it in social media. Every social media app has some sort of feed, and that feed today is almost universally generated by AI. So here's the For You page from a TikTok feed, AI generated, influenced by TikTok. And here's another example. So this is from Google I/O, Google's recent announcement of its upcoming technologies. And what they're doing here is they are providing AI summaries of articles on the web. So you ask a question of Google, and it gives you the summary, and it's taken that data from the web. You can just about see down the bottom, you've got something from Quora telling you that. And for me, the implications of this one, I mean, at a consumer level, it's fantastic. You get your answer straight away. From a news provider with a website that quite likes people viewing it, it's slightly concerning because I'm not sure how often people will click through that onto our BBC articles. And then creators, again, are getting almost exactly the same tools as professional production. So this is just a funny example from Snapchat. So Snapchat's AI filters are continually evolving, and here's somebody applying it to a piece of art. So I think there is amazing opportunity here, and I think we, as news organizations, can really take the opportunity to, I think, use what we have today in terms of current funding and resources, and potentially produce higher quality outputs and more, and potentially more relevant to our consumers. However, moving on to the risks part of the presentation, as we've gone through this list, hopefully you sort of started thinking about ways in which maybe we need to protect ourselves and protect people from maybe some of the slightly negative parts of these technologies. Now, I'm coming at this from a disinformation angle. So this set of risks is kind of looking at disinformation. There are lots of other risks that we do need to mitigate. So I would encourage you to go back and have a think about these. But number one on here is, you could imagine this generative AI that's used to create content, creating content that deliberately misleads. I've got some examples later on. And that's damaging to society as a whole. But then the second one is maybe one that's more personal to each of the news organizations here, which is impersonation is a real concern as well. If the production of this content is so simple, how easy is it to impersonate an organization, to lend some truth, some genuineness, some authenticity to that. So somebody puts your logo on a piece of content to tell a completely different message. And then another thing that we've seen happening now, and I think we're kind of in it, we're not going to change this, but we can maybe mitigate it. The existence of generative AI and deepfakes and things like that makes denying genuine content much more believable. So if I have a piece of content that I don't like, I might go onto social media and say, did you see how he blinked in the 4th frame of the 2nd second? That's definitely evidence of it being AI generated. And if people do this, it can cast doubt on a genuine message that has been put out. Another one is that we might publish other people's fake or misleading content by accident. We're going to have tons of this content coming in over the next few years. It's going to, all of our ingest pipelines are going to start showing up generative AI. And we need to find ways to understand when it does come from AI and when it actually comes from a camera. Because if we don't, it's either a huge workflow strain. Every single thing needs to be fact-checked really, really carefully, which is a lot of resources, or we make a mistake and we publish somebody's fake content by accident. And then the last two, we've got users noticing our undisclosed use of AI. So that is, if we use AI in the production process and then we give it to users, what can they, if they find out that that was AI generated, will that reduce their trust in us? So thinking about that. And then finally, I think this last one is AI is amazing. I've shown some amazing examples of how it can make things better, but I also think there is a danger that if you jump to it very quickly and you don't think through how your production process with AI can work and you apply it too liberally, like we've seen other organizations do this, you can actually reduce the quality and the creativity of your outputs. So we need to be careful as we adopt it. Here are some example principles. So the idea here was, as you go into adopting generative AI and other bits of AI in your workflows, it might be a good idea to publish or at least agree some principles within your organizations on how you're going to treat AI. These are some examples. So we got transparency, maybe telling people that you've been using AI in a particular piece of content. Safeguarding trust. It's incredibly hard to maintain this trust relationship. We all work really hard for it. We need to make sure that our use of AI doesn't reduce that trust. Educating people. So AI is now commonplace, but not everybody knows what AI is. Not everybody knows what it's capable of. And not everybody knows that it's not always the truth, that it can do something called hallucination as well. So education. And the last one, up to you. You might also choose to prioritize humans because they're pretty cool. The BBC actually published, not this set, but its own set of principles at that URL below. So as we think about these risks, can we think about the different kinds of solutions that maybe might help mitigate some of these? Because we'd like to use AI. There's all of these great possibilities for us. So we might need to look at this and change some of our workflows. So if we decide that transparency is important to us, then maybe as part of our workflow, we then need to start talking about how we used AI and be specific in order to tell people what's gone on. So for a given piece of content, do we need bits of our workflow that say, this step was generated by AI, or this bit used an AI from this model, or this was the data set that we used when we created it. And it is a responsibility of the vendors we have in AI. So all of the people that produce these AI models, they need to resolve these risks too. But ultimately, it's our brands at risk. We're the ones with our names on all of the content that goes out. And so we need to take care too. And then BBC, Microsoft, Adobe, Sony, CBC Radio Canada, and a few others around the industry are working on an effort called C2PA, so Open Media Provenance. And this is the idea behind this is it will help show people where content comes from to hopefully improve their trust. So looking at these example principles, let's dig into transparency and safeguarding trust and how we might be able to resolve that with, or at least help with something like content credentials. So we started with the idea of deepfakes and shallow fakes. We were concerned about what they might do. So a group of organizations got together, named ourselves Project Origin, and we decided we wanted to tackle the danger of deepfakes and shallow fakes. And shallow fake is like a video that's just been edited with conventional video editing tools in order to mislead. And we saw they were harming audience trust and they were damaging brands. And then out of that organization, we joined up with a few other organizations and founded the C2PA. And that allowed us to securely label content for consumers, which allows them to see where it's come from and what's been done to it. So as well as deepfakes and shallow fakes, along came this a few years later. So this is a piece of generative AI. It's not a deepfake. So everything in that scene has been generated by AI. And so that caused a huge stir. And it's actually caused more people to look at C2PA as a solution, and we'll go into the people that are looking at it now. But yeah, the idea there is that these people that produce these AI models, like ChatGPT and things like that, might then choose to use C2PA to label their content specifically. And in C2PA terms, we call it algorithmically trained media, but essentially that means generative AI. And so another look at our background. So this is in the UK, and again, the Reuters Institute for News doing an amazing job, showing us that over time, trust is declining. Now, there's so many factors in this, and I don't want to go into all of them here, but this helps us see that the problem we're facing. And our suggestion was, if we have if we're seeing this decline in trust, and we think there is a small component of it that is from technology, as a result of this rapidly developing technology in social and now maybe in AI, could we also then have a technology solution that helps with that component? And so we decided that we wanted to try and show people where that content came from. Regardless of where you are, if you're on a social media platform, if you're on a news organization's app or your homepage, you can show people what happened to it. And so in this example, what I'm showing is right back on the top right there, you can see we've actually captured at the camera level. All of this is optional, by the way. You could choose what level to capture at. But in this example, we've shown you've gone back to the camera, and we've actually said the camera is telling you where it was captured and when. So that's useful data. And then critically, it's signed. So it uses this cryptographic technology that's part of websites today with secure certificates. It signs that data, and you can then pull it forward. So then somebody brings it into maybe Photoshop, and they make some changes. So then you might do some filtering, some changing some colors, and you might record that as well. And then finally, maybe somebody like the BBC decides to publish it, and we might add a caption or a description, and maybe change the size of that image for different devices. And so, yeah, all of this comes together. So we've got these two organizations, Origin and C2PA. C2PA is creating this content credential specification, and Origin down the bottom is doing the job of working out how we identify news organizations. How do people know when they see the BBC or another broadcaster's name that is actually the BBC and that name hasn't been faked? So that's a job of Origin at the IPTC. And then we've seen some huge adoption recently. So TikTok announced recently they were going to be using C2PA for AI-generated content, to label AI-generated content, which is great. OpenAI have been doing it for quite a while now. And we're also seeing cameras, so Sony and Fujifilm, Canon, Nikon have all announced that they're going to be doing this. And then Google are now a member of the steering board. And so that opens up loads of options because Google's got lots of different products, from Pixels to Google Photos to Google Image Search. So when I said I was going to identify opportunities at the BBC, the first one we looked at was a unit of the BBC News called BBC Verify. Now, BBC Verify acts like a traditional fact checker. It looks at the content that comes in, makes a decision if that content is important and potentially newsworthy, and then if it's coming from an unknown source, they then take the next step and they do manual verification. And we were seeing some amazing stories come out from BBC Verify, but BBC Verify didn't always get the chance to share the hours of work that they put into verifying these pieces of content. And we thought, as part of a content credentials trial, could we show audiences what has been done, what the BBC did, and might that change how they thought about that content? So we put it on our BBC homepage. We've got 3 pieces of content at the moment. And so here's a piece of content that comes in, and people click down the bottom, that blue "How we verified this" box, and they get this, an explanation of the verification checks that were done. So right at the top, the video from the cemetery is first uploaded to TikTok. We've matched gravestones, large trees, and other landmarks to existing images found on Google Maps. And then they've done some work to find where they think the location of that video is and when they think it was created. And so as part of this, we've been doing some research. This was from 2003. And here we said, so editorial here means professional photos, photos you might find on a news wire from an agency like Reuters. And we asked people, we get in the gray, we said, here are some photos. We're not going to tell you where they're from. Could you tell us, just by looking at them, how much you trust them? And so what was really interesting was the ones from wires, relatively low, stock photography in the middle. UGC was the highest trust. There was some sort of, people felt that there was something authentic about the UGC, even though we didn't label it like that, which we found fascinating. But then we applied C2PA provenance to it and did this test again, and we found it brought people up across the board. As people could see that extra data and rely on it, they were more likely to understand where it had come from and trust it. So we've got some early trial results. 83% of users that have viewed this BBC Verify work say that they trust the media more after they've seen those extra bits of verification. We can't separate this from the actual technology at the moment. It's a combination of the journalism and the technology. So maybe we'll do some more work on that in the future. They definitely found it useful, and they definitely found it informative. So here are some other use cases, and this is where I'm going to bring this back to AI. So maybe we could have this in social media. Maybe this could be part of social, like messaging apps like WhatsApp. So here we've got WhatsApp, and I put somebody sent me 2 images. The bottom one is faked. I've taken a random graph off the internet and I've added the BBC blocks to it. So you can see that there. The top one is actually from a BBC News article. It also has the BBC blocks on it. But with content credentials, what we can do is if this app supports them, we could sign the top one from the BBC. Nobody else can do that. They don't have the ability, they don't have the keys that you need to do that. And so we can actually, inside the app, give them the indication that it's from the BBC, and then the one that isn't only gets it's an unknown source, or maybe it's somebody else's name. So you can start giving people better signals. And the key thing here is we're not telling people what to trust. If they don't trust the BBC, they don't have to trust the information that's in the graphic. But they can know that it actually came from the BBC. And then we also think at verification, this is going to be big, but this is going to take longer. If people start supporting this in cameras, so right down at the bottom, maybe we've got somebody taking a picture of their mobile phone, it might capture the location and the date, and then that gives us an audit trail when we're doing our verification checks, and it might help us reduce the amount of effort we have to put into those verification checks. And then finally, one of the things we're really hoping this will help mitigate is some of those risks around AI labeling. So here we've got content credentials, and it's telling us that this is AI generated. This particular image is fairly obviously AI generated, but there are many that are very, very, very realistic. And so the responsible players will start adding these signals, and you'll start seeing them on social media networks in the future. And then, yeah, where we think this is useful, yeah, we definitely think looking for AI at the start of your pipelines will be critical. So that's the verification step. Is it from a particular camera? Do you trust that camera? Where was it taken? Do I trust the source? Do I not? And then we think telling people about AI that eventually gets published by your organization. So it doesn't just have to be, this was from a generative AI. It could be, a small part of this was edited slightly by an AI tool. And how far you go with that is up to you as an organization. So I had a question that I wanted to ask, like, if we end up labeling things like this and AI ends up in every workflow, how do we really know, how do consumers really know what to trust if we get to a point where everything has AI as a part of it? And the only answer I have to that is us, really. If we can put our name behind things and we can have a track record of not misleading users, then maybe our names are the ones that float to the top in this new world. So we've covered quite a few risks here as we've gone through content credentials. There's many other risks, but there's also many other opportunities. We should work together. So I think that's what's great about this community, this organization, getting a chance to work together. We need to stay relevant and valuable. This AI isn't going away. And so, yeah, we know these risks need to be resolved by vendors, but we're not powerless. We can make change. C2PA is one example, and I would encourage people to do that, to join us. But what other collaborations, what other solutions are needed as an industry? So thank you very much.
Thank you. We still have 2 minutes, so maybe some questions from the audience. Do you have any questions to Mr. Charlie Burford? No? No questions for now. All right, thank you so much. Thank you. That was really inspiring. I was really interested in those trust issues, because trust is a currency of the future, I guess.